So I'm here at Athlete Movement, just about to deliver a little workshop on eating for performance. Really looking forward to meeting the members here, finding out what they struggle with around that, giving them some great advice about how to fuel their performance, whatever their goals might be, whether it's fat loss, muscle gain, or performance. I'm Tim, I'm a level 4 nutrition coach. I've finished my level 2 fitness instructor qualifications. I am taking my level 3 PT at the moment. Sports-wise, I've mostly played cricket from like the age of 17 probably, so I was a bit late to that game, but that's been my main sport. Really enjoy the gym. This is kind of like my ideal place to train. If I live closer, I'll be training here all the time. I love to ski, which is one of the reasons I love to train. It's a really indulgent hobby and I like to get the most out of it when I go. And I've just taken up strongman, which is kind of how I know Ben and Nick, and that's how I've ended up here, kind of getting involved in this community. Probably drink too much coffee. I really like ice cream and I like food in general. So my whole philosophy is around flexibility, around food. That kind of scales a bit to our goals, but the more often we say no to something, the more we just want it in the end. So if we can include a little bit of the good stuff, that's going to help us sustain it for long enough. My original training was as an engineer. I've worked in a corporate environment. I've travelled all over the country. I've worked in an office, travelled around, and I've managed to do this health and fitness and nutrition thing for myself while I've done all of that. So I do understand what it's like to have a day job and fit your training and nutrition around that. I'm going to kind of split it into 3 broad topics, which what were advertised really. A little bit about the basics, building a healthy balanced meal. Again, some of this stuff you might know, it might just be framed in a different way, but with every single one of my clients, we dial in the basics first and then we get more advanced, because if we build poor foundation, we've got no chance of getting more advanced with anything. I'll do a little bit of myth busting. I'll give you my take on supplements that, if you can afford them, might be worth it. And I'll give you the pros and cons and the reasons why. And I'll talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of exactly what to do in terms of how to fuel your workouts, pre-workout, post-workout. Keep it nice and simple, just some ideas around that. Ultimately, good food makes you feel great. So if we think about it with the mindset of eating for performance, fueling our inner athlete, think about it like this. If you were to put supermarket petrol in a Formula 1 car, it wouldn't even turn over. It wouldn't even start. So we've got to put the right stuff in to get the result we want out from the end of it. That's a combination of good hydration, nourishing ourselves properly. That unlocks performance. We need the right balance of vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein, carbs, and fats, which I'll kind of show you in a minute. Like to think about it a little bit as the graphic on the left. Social media, lots of marketing, lots of fitness marketing that is probably a little disingenuous, is going to focus on the stuff on the right that doesn't actually get us a result but is nice and attractive and a quick win. We kind of need to focus on the stuff on the left, stuff we'd stereotypically think about as a healthy diet, not forgetting that even athletes have the odd bottle of beer, they have a little bit of chocolate now and then. They just have enough of the good stuff, often enough, to fuel everything. They use the chocolate, the beer, etc. for a little bit of balance if they enjoy those kinds of things. Just the concept, because I think a visual is often a great place to start. If we're just into general health and fitness, we don't have any massive aspirations, this is a great place to get started. Fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables. Fill a quarter of your plate with things like beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meat to get our protein in. For the other quarter of our plate with things like potatoes, oats, cereals, rice, pasta. Carbs give us energy. Protein helps us to repair. Fats are important, they're essential for health. That portion is a lot smaller, like 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions. As we get more active, veg stays kind of the same, protein stays kind of the same, fats stay kind of the same. We manipulate our carbs up if we want more energy, we manipulate them down if we want less energy because we don't move as much, or we maybe want to lose some fat. Put a slightly different way, we can kind of use our palm to judge portions. We can also track calories if we're more advanced, but it's always a great place to start, just to kind of construct a real strong basic meal using the simplest method possible. Once we get on top of that, then we can start to add levels of complexity. If you were to think about building a meal, always look for, where am I getting my protein from first? Can I get a load of veg on that plate? And then I'm going to put an appropriate sized portion of carbs on there for my goal. So if I'm a strong man, I'm training really hard, I want to put on some muscle, I'm going to need to bolster up those carbs to fuel the explosive power that I need. I'm going to keep some fats in there to keep me healthy. Fats allow us to absorb the vitamins in our food. The reason for all of us to eat plenty of vegetables is if we're really active, we burn through all our vitamins and minerals. We need to put those back for optimal health. If you're in optimal health, you're going to have the best possible chance of unlocking all of your potential. If you're in the best possible health, it's going to be way easier if we've got a fat loss goal to keep on top of our appetite and to reduce cravings, because if we fuel ourselves properly, the cravings tend to start to look after themselves. I like to use the 80-20 rule, so do this 80% of the time. The other 20% of the time, do what you like, provided we can do that in moderation. So if we've got a real trigger and we know we're going to go out for a Saturday night and we're going to go off the rails on the booze, either make it a great night or put some parameters around that if you want your goal to align with it. Always remember that low calories kill performance. Don't split our goals. Let's lose some fat, keep it off, build in performance. If we're trying to cross our goals about and we're trying to undereat, and I did this for years myself, it destroys your performance. Eat enough to fuel what you're doing. Don't be afraid of eating a little bit more if you're staying in the shape that you want to be. Add a little bit more, chip away, find the top level of where you can stay where you're happy with. I like this little graphic. I've not ripped it off of anyone. I've credited the author at the bottom there, Eric Helms. It's a really simple way to think about nutrition. The most important part of this graphic is actually the bottom piece. A lot of people, when we start talking about calories and things which are important, they say, oh, well, it's not just about calories. That's too simple. It is, because it doesn't consider this bottom piece. If your behavior and your lifestyle are not in check and they're not in control, if we're not getting to bed on time, we're out partying loads, or we're so busy at work, we've got all these plates in the air, we're mega stressed, it's going to be really hard to do anything else in the layers of this pyramid. So we must build our house on strong foundations, because if we build it on sand, we can have the very best building materials and they will just come crashing down. We have to get that foundation right. And then it starts to become as simple as eat less, lose fat, eat more, gain weight, or performance. And gaining muscle and performance comes down also to appropriate training. Clearly you need a good program. You can't just eat more and expect a result. You need to put the physical work into that. In order of importance, calories. And then most people in the room, it's going to be calories, and get your protein target right. And that's all you kind of need to worry about. Calories can be looked after by portions that we talked about before. They can be looked after by checking out some labels on some packets. They can be looked after by using a calorie tracking app. If you're going to look into calories, make sure you've got a solid relationship with food. If you've got any history of kind of disordered eating, or you get some worries about that, the earlier advice is more important. Pick great food choices, get control of the portions in a different way, because then you won't start to overthink things. As we go up the pyramid, macronutrients become important, but what I'm saying is if you get your protein right and you get your calories right, the amount of fat and the amount of carbs we eat is looked after by the bottom layer of calories. So fats and carbs can just slide to your personal taste, provided as an athlete we're keeping our diet carb heavy, because if we start eating sticks of butter, that's not great for you health-wise, and you are not going to be able to convert that fat very quickly into explosive energy, which is what you need for sport, for gym performance. I talked a little bit about monitoring progress. Everyone's way of monitoring progress is going to be different, but have some method of how well am I sticking to my eating regime? How well am I doing with my habits around that? And then maybe consider, if you've got a good relationship with standing on the scales, which not everyone does, maybe consider monitoring that. If you don't, consider taking a tape measure, just measuring around your belly button, because that scales to your body fat. And if it goes down, you're losing body fat. If it goes up, you're gaining it. It's a good measure of health as well. That feedback allows us to say, how well am I doing with my nutrition? Do I need to change anything? Do I need to dive into the detail and maybe start looking at calories, maybe ask some different questions about what I'm doing? Fat loss happens relatively quickly when we hook it up. You're going to lose about between 0.5% and 1.5% of your body weight per week if you hook it up. Track that monthly because it fluctuates through loads of different things. If muscle gain is our goal, we can expect to, as a male, gain 0.5% to 1.5% per month. It's way slower, 4 times slower, where a lot of people get stuck if they start to try and bulk. They expect it to happen really quickly. You've got to give it a good 6-8 months. If we do start to eat more, the weight goes up quite rapidly for a couple of weeks, which is water retention, and then it all chills out. So you think you've gained 5 kilos in 2 weeks, and actually you've just filled up your muscles with energy stores. So just be aware of that. If muscle gain is your goal, be patient, give it a good 6 months before you try and jack it in. Otherwise, you get stuck in a cycle of, I've got lean, tried to put on some muscle, I didn't like it, I've given up too early. You just get in this perpetual cycle of it being just nasty. Success is always in the middle ground. Make it easy, make it enjoyable. Think about what you can add rather than take away. Example of the 80-20 rule in the bottom corner, that is my supermarket ready meal. It's a chicken jambalaya from Sainsbury's, dead easy. It's like 500 calories, bang it in the microwave. It doesn't have much veg. So I've got some frozen vegetables, boiled them up, 2 minutes, less time than it took to do the ready meal. At least I've enriched that with something good and something nutritious. Looking back to our pyramid, supplements come right at the top of the tree because supplement is just there to basically fill in the gaps. It's there to complete or enhance something. If we haven't got behaviour in check, behaviour lifestyle in check, our energy balance is all over the shop, the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. We need to get those in that order of priority. Having said that, almost everybody might benefit from a full spectrum multivitamin, so it's multivitamin that's got a bit of everything in it, because some days we might just not eat enough vegetables. I definitely do that a lot of the time. So I take it as an insurance policy. I also work indoors a lot. I don't get much vitamin D because you only get that from the sunshine. It's a safety net if you can afford it. It's not essential. You can absolutely get everything you want to from your food if you've got a balanced diet, and that's the reason to balance our diet. If we don't eat much oily fish, we might want to take an omega-3 supplement. If we eat 2 portions of oily fish a week, then you probably don't need one. Again, fits your habits, fills in gaps where they might need filling. Omega-3 is there to reduce inflammation, improve our recovery. Really good stuff to do if we're active. Protein powder is probably one of the best supplements, I think, that you can take, especially as someone who's active, because we're going to have an elevated protein requirement, and it just makes it easy. Protein's filling, so if we're bulking and looking at muscle gain, drinking it makes sense because we're not going to get so full that we can't eat enough to fuel our performance. If we train first thing in the morning, we might just want to grab a shake after we finish working out because we know we're not going to eat lunch for like 3-4 hours. It's just going to be super convenient to have some powdered shake in our bag, fill it up with water, drink it, get in the car, drive to work. It's there for convenience. It's also way cheaper than most sources of protein, so there's a cost benefit to that as well when we've got an elevated protein need. Again, can you afford it? Is it necessary for your goals? If you're very active, some kind of good stuff to look at that is maybe going to be like a 5%er. Remembering that we've got to train properly, we've got to have a good program, we've got to be training hard, we've got to have our nutrition in check. These things might help a little bit. Creatine's there for hypertrophy or muscle growth and repair. It allows you, when you're working for less than a minute, to squeeze out maybe an extra couple of reps, 1 or 2 reps. If we squeeze out an extra 1 or 2 reps over a month, 2 months, 3 months, our exercise volume increases. We get some reward to that training. We're able to train a little bit harder, which is going to help us develop a little bit further. It is not a magic bullet for just taking creatine and expecting muscle gain. You've got to put the work in with the nutrition behind that. Beta-alanine is another good one. If we're doing more like CrossFit style training, more HIIT training where we're doing stuff for a bit longer, that kind of buffers the lactic acid in our system. It allows us to go a bit further. And again, if we're training that little bit harder, we're pushing ourselves a bit harder, we're overloading ourselves a little bit harder, and we get a little bit more performance. That's why it's like a 5%er. Caffeine's really good, biggest performance enhancing drug out there. It's controlled in pro sport. It masks fatigue. It doesn't mask fatigue very well when you drown yourself in it every single day. So less is more. If you want the benefit from caffeine, dial it down a bit, use it strategically about when you want to mask that fatigue. So did Ben's summer strongman comp a few weeks ago. I kind of had 1 coffee a day for that week leading up to it. When I had my caffeine at the weekend, it did have an effect. But I drink like 4 cups of coffee a week, so that's a big change for me to swing from that. Electrolytes are a good one, especially in this weather. It's quite muggy, we're sweating a bit more. Water hydrates us, electrolytes make sure we're fully hydrated, so we end up peeing a little bit less because we're properly hydrated and we're not just flushing stuff through. The benefits of hydration: mental focus, which is still important on the gym floor because you've got to look after your form. If you're doing a complicated lift, you need to concentrate on that. Really important for sport. I play cricket. Make sure all of the guys at the cricket club are well hydrated because that is all concentration. If our hydration dips, destroys our concentration, also makes our fatigue higher. So getting well hydrated before we start, hydrating through our session is a good idea. Now these are like the real 1%ers here. Does anyone in this room have do any endurance training or anything where they're doing, like maybe running over an hour, cycling, stuff like that? Definitely not, no. So it's important, like 1 hour continuously. So if we're down there for 1 hour and 45 and we're training, we've got 1.5 minutes rest between everything, and we're chatting to our mates, that's not an hour session. That's like a summation of 30, 40 minutes where we've had a break in between. So essentially that comes down to, if we have got that kind of goal, we might just want to top up the carbs in our system because we basically store carbs in our muscles and our liver. They're instantly accessible, which is a good reason to eat carbs. That only lasts about an hour. So if we've done an hour and we're going to do a bit more, we might want to fill them back up. If we're going to work out twice in a day, so like a morning session, an evening session, we might want to get some carbs in straight after our session, so we top those stores back up quickly, so we're good to go for the second session of the day. Curcumin is another one that's got a good amount of research around it about joint health because it reduces inflammation. Again, if you can afford it, if you think it has value for you. Personally, I don't take it. I try and do my ROMWOD every night, so I'm getting my mobility in. I try and make sure I rest, I sleep well. I don't feel my joints are achy, so I don't take it. But again, it's there to help you push yourself a bit harder. Worth a try if you can afford it and you see some benefit. Finally, fueling and recovery. Just a reminder that the pyramid still exists. People will, in this room, probably understand the benefits of protein, but it's always worth just revisiting that. It's there for muscle repair and recovery, but it's the building block of every cell in our body. It also helps produce hormones. We can't get it other than eating it, so it's always a good idea to elevate our protein. If we've got an athletic goal, keep it high. It's good for our bone density. Actually, protein plus weight training plus calcium makes our bones stronger. Keeps you feeling full, which is good if you're on a diet, not necessarily if you're bulking, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Keeping it really simple, 1 to 2 palm-sized portions at every meal. Start there, build that habit, because even if you're calorie tracking and you want to stop, you can still use that habit. If we want to dial into the detail, around 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of your ideal body weight is probably enough for most people, or is enough for most people. If you're more into muscle growth, go to the top end. If you're more into just general sports, you can be at the bottom end. Use your ideal body weight. So I think if you're ever looking to lose weight, if you've got a bit of weight to lose, you don't need the extra protein to support that fat mass. So that helps you to save money, basically. And you can eat more carbs that way as well, because there's more room in your calorie allowance. For muscle gain, I personally would say, knock it right down to 1.8. Sometimes people think they need to have more protein when they're pushing the muscle gain. 1.8 is kind of going to be enough for 95% of people. If you feel you're a particularly poor responder or you just want a safety net, by all means go up to 2.2, but dropping it down slightly gives you more room for carbs. And if you're eating a lot and you're feeling too full, it's going to be easier to eat the carbs than it is the protein. Whilst timing kind of matters, it's not the biggest deal. Overall amount is the thing to focus on first. If you can get some in a couple of hours after working out, that's a good idea. If you can't get protein in within 2 hours of your workout, nothing bad happens. Your muscles don't fall off, right? Your workout is one element, the protein intake is the other. Putting them together starts the process of muscle repair. If you don't put them together, it's just on pause. So you've potentially, if you wait 4 hours after your workout to have your lunch, you just maybe missed out on a couple of hours of protein repair. It's not going to be a huge deal. So ideally space it out through the day. Ideally have it a couple of hours between your workout, but nobody needs to be slamming a shake as soon as they drop the barbell. That's not where we need to be at. Eating around exercise. If we follow the general stuff I've talked about, have a healthy balanced diet, we've got carbs in there, we've got a bit of protein, we go and do a session that's less than an hour, you've probably got enough in the tank. If you want to optimize that, you might want to put a few carbs in there that are just easy to digest, to sit nicely on our stomach so they don't bounce if we start pushing ourselves hard. That may or may not have an impact, but if it psychologically has an impact, arguably that's the thing to do. I quite like to have a little something before I train, just because then I feel I've got something in the tank and I can go a bit harder. Psychology is probably the most important bit around that. I've already talked about if we're going to train twice, we have some carbs after that first session just to fuel them back up. Just a few ideas around what we might decide to eat as like a pre-workout snack. All really simple. They're just mini versions of like a main meal. So just some ideas. I think what I tend to go for more often than not is 1 or 2 slices of toast, a bit of peanut butter with a banana chopped up on top, just because it's easy and quick. And normally I've realised I should have eaten an hour before I need to go training, so I need to get it done and dusted. If you eat closer to training, that's where like the more refined sort of foods can come in, because they digest really quickly. Something like a bowl of Rice Krispies, white bread rather than brown bread, it's going to digest more quickly, so there's less chance of it sitting on our stomach, making us feel a bit naff when we're training, especially if we're going to like put a weightlifting belt or something on. You don't want anything sat there while you just clip that belt on. If you want to find out more about food flexibility, pop over to my website. There's a few little free resources on there. I've got a mailing list. I've got a little blog where I've got a few tips and tricks. So there's bits on there about hydration. There's a few bits where I've written some geekier articles. There's a bits where I've written some articles that are a bit more simple. You can drop me an email, contact me through the website. If you want to find out more about how I could specifically help you one-on-one, feel free to book in a free call. That's where I find out about you, how we can work together. I'd much rather you have lasting success and it takes a bit longer than a fad diet, a crash diet, 6-week transformation that just doesn't last. That's kind of how I roll. I like to be really flexible. I like people to be able to do it for themselves once they finish working with me. I'll turn the floor over to you guys. Ask me anything. I might not know the answer, but I'll give it a good go.
I did have some questions before this started, but you kind of...
Have I just like thrown everything at me? Got your answers?
I was just going to touch on supplements, particularly
Yeah.
protein.
Yep.
Being such a saturated market with incredible range in prices, if you look at the ingredients, arguably the same product. What would be your advice on where to go? Not necessarily what brand you recommend, but as in like how to handle that spectrum.
I've saved a really good Instagram clip from somewhere he talks about the essential amino acid content, and he goes into the detail of that. That's the thing to look for, but I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. But you always get what you pay for. So quite often, the more expensive one, provided you kind of got to read between the lines a bit, because sometimes they're really expensive because they're massively marketed. But with something like a whey protein, quite a lot of people get gassed with that, but I find if you buy the better quality ones, they've got less fillers, the ones that are more kind of 100% whey, 90% whey, tend to be better on your digestion because they've got less junk in them. If you're looking for something like a vegan protein, the thing to look out there for is a blend of something like rice and pea protein, because it's got a better amino acid profile, all the building blocks. I'll dig that thing out for you before you leave. I'll show you the actual detail of that.
People talk a lot about red meat and whether you should or shouldn't eat it, whether it's good for you, whether it's also it's a good source of protein, but long-term effects not so good. Like, what do you suggest?
So, yeah, that's an interesting question. And when I studied, our lecturer gave us a lot of interesting information on that. So it is true that the World Health Organization have classified red meat as a carcinogen and put it up there with smoking. They've also done some other stuff that is a bit funky that people politically don't agree with. The reason they did that is because their job is to kind of say there is a danger here, there is a lot of evidence here that there's a danger, so we'll flag that. If you start to read between the lines of the evidence, though, it's very difficult in nutrition to understand exactly if there's an impact, because most nutritional studies are observational. So it's like, hey, what did you eat at the weekend? I don't know. I don't even remember what I ate at the weekend, right? So people are misreporting slightly. There's also kind of people who are mega fit and into their health are going to eat a little bit better than people who aren't. People who are eating a lot of junk food possibly going to have more red processed meats, but they also don't have the rest of their diet that in check. They might smoke, they might be really stressed, they might be working 2 jobs, they might be struggling to earn ends meet. All of those things have an impact on your risk of cancer as well as the red meat. What we do know is, like, mechanistically, the thing that might cause cancer in red meat is something I think that is called heme iron. When we eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, all of those, the mechanism of that reduces the impact of the heme iron and reduces our risk of cancer. So if we're fit and healthy, we eat loads of fruits and vegetables, the risk from red meat is less prevalent, and you could argue it possibly isn't even there. But it's very difficult to prove that because it depends on your lifestyle. But what you can say is if you enjoy red meat, you boss your lifestyle, you eat plenty of veg with it, keep yourself active, it's probably not a huge risk. And even if it was, they talk about it's like statistics get used badly. So they quote the headline figure of it's this percentage, but that's this percentage above the background. So actually if you take all the numbers away, the percentage is much smaller even if you don't have all that stuff in check. So I hope that kind of gives a lot of context around that. Personally, I enjoy eating red meat. I'm not going to stop. I don't see a problem. If I go and buy sausages, I get them from my butcher because I think he's going to put more meat in them rather than the Richmond ones from the supermarket. Those kind of things. Like that's my take on it. But if you wanted to be mega sure, maybe limit it to a couple of times a week. Make sure you get fruit and veg in.
Yeah. Lectins, is that a thing?
Lectins.
Yeah, I've just been reading. You know,
Okay.
You start off on a cat video and you end up
Yeah,
on a nutrition thing. And it's about because all the things we think are healthy, like the wholemeal bread and the tomatoes and the peppers. And when you're on a healthy, you do all that. And then there's a thing about it's got lectins in it, and they're like these little spiky molecules, and they rip your gut, and you get leaky gut, and it goes into your joints, and it makes you ache. And I don't know if that's rubbish or, you know.
It's not something I can't myth bust that in the detail. I just did the red meat thing, but it doesn't sound quite right to me.
Have you heard of it or not?
No, and I think a lot of the stuff to do with gut health is really not well understood, even by like clinical dietitians who do this for a living. It's a real difficult subject to unpick because like medical science doesn't really understand it. So there might be, but there probably isn't.
I've been reading, because my job, I'm a dental hygienist,
okay,
I'm reading about whether gum disease is associated with the gut or whether the gut causes gum disease.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
So I was kind of reading around that, and then I thought, oh no, all the healthy things that we think are healthy to eat, maybe.
Well, so what they kind of do know, maybe not completely 100% scientifically, is that if you've got a wide variety of plants in your diet, you get a wide variety of the bugs that support your gut health. And quite often a lot of the interventions that a dietitian will be making are giving you a prescription probiotic, because the one's over the counter, it's just a waste of money, and getting you to eat a massive variety of fruits and vegetables if you can tolerate those, to develop that gut flora and really build it up, and that tends to give us a better health outcome. That's kind of where the science is pointing, but it's very misunderstood and it's not really clear. Good question. I'm interested in the.
To eat tomatoes.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Yeah.
I was going to ask what your stance is on like the whole food approach. By that I mean, obviously there are so many products out now that have been like artificially reduced in fat or like 0 calorie this because they filled it with sweeteners or something.
Yeah.
Would you say it would be better to go for the, if I say whole, let's take butter for example.
Yep.
Go for like a normal normal butter rather than going for like reduced fat spread because you think
Yeah.
it's lower calories?
So actually, like for a nutritional value point of view, the butter is going to be the bigger bang for your buck. Yeah, as you start to interfere with those sort of things, you start to change the molecular structure. Might not be so good for you. If you enjoy the spread and you don't have much of it, probably not a big deal. But the more we can pick foods that we haven't interfered a lot with the more nutrition we're going to get out from them, because the more we cook them, the more we tinker around with them, the more we strip back that nutrition. Going back to the 80-20 rule though, like 80% is more than good enough. Even an Olympic gold medalist will follow that. They might just say, I'm going to do, in the year before the Olympics, I'm going to do 90-10 because I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I really want that gold medal.
Yeah.
The rest of us, 80% is going to get us all the way there. Added sugar, so that's like where they take the fat out of things, they quite often put sugar back in. So they go low fat, check the calories. Because maybe they have, and like something like a 0% Greek yogurt is low fat naturally. They haven't put anything in it. As soon as they start putting the sugar back in it, soon catches up to the calories of the full fat version. If any of you got kids, they're much better off eating full fat dairy than they are low fat dairy. Really good for their health. Full fat stuff helps us feel fuller for longer. Fat is important in our diet. Just might have a bit less protein in the full fat versions of the dairy stuff. Yes, hi.
Tell us more about the probiotics, because you mentioned that the prescription one is better, because I've never...
Yeah, so what I meant by that was that if you want a probiotic that will work, you should probably have that prescribed by a dietitian, because they can run all the tests and things. They can really understand whether you need it and target the dose medically. It's like a medical intervention. They can prescribe that. If you are going to take an over-the-counter probiotic, look for one that's got the biggest amount of bacteria in it, because that's going to have the best chance of getting out of the capsule through all your digestive system, through your stomach, and where it needs to belong. So it's not a case of like don't take it, but it's a case of it may or may not work. So it might be worth a try if you can afford it.
Because I'm spending so much on the supermarket probiotics, that's why.
Sure. So actually, me and my wife have kefir, which is kind of like the taste. It's got some live bacteria in it, and like things like kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut that are fresh, have fermented foods that are fresh. So they'll be in the chiller aisle and they won't have a long shelf life. Those have got lots of probiotics in them too. They're quite traditional. They may be as effective as the over-the-counter ones. It's not the over-the-counter ones wouldn't be, but we can't really say for sure. If you notice a difference by taking them, then that's cool. Like, but if you don't, then
It's been a while.
yeah.
It's been a while taking them, and I haven't seen the effect. And I just literally switched over to fermented
Okay.
stuff from the brand tab. The supermarket I've been buying all the time.
Okay.
It's so much different. So that's why you caught my interest when you mentioned.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Glutamine is quite good for gut health, is that true?
Glutamine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up. And if I were to, I'd go over to examine.com to look that up. That's a good source if you ever come across supplements. There's a subscription bit, but you can get enough information from the free bit to kind of say yes or no if it's got any kind of. I don't know. I haven't come across that. I'm going to write it down and learn though. Glutamine.
So you play cricket and you take part in strongman stuff
Yep.
as well. How do you find a balance between, so for example, if you're doing strongman stuff in the morning and playing cricket in the evening,
Yeah.
how do you find that balance of what you're eating, when you've got to eat, so that you can be exposed to both?
Yeah.
I kind of do that with football. And
Yeah, okay.
And it's like, you then knackered by the time you get to the next thing. It's like, well, I've never got enough power to do that.
Most recently, I just played 20 over cricket. It's shorter time, more intensity. So let's say if I was playing cricket this evening, which is typical, and I had my training session earlier, train about lunchtime. So I have my breakfast, I have a snack before I train. I get back from training, have my normal meal. I look to have a snack before I go to cricket, and then whilst I'm at cricket, I've got a load of electrolyte just to keep me hydrated. I've got some carbs in one of those bottles of electrolyte. So I might go out to field. The problem with cricket is it's possibly less predictable than a game of football. So the reason I do it is I've got loads of snacks in my bag. We go out on field and I've run around a load. I'll come back in, I'll nail my electrolyte with the carbs because then I've got to go and bat and I've got to run around. And then if I had a long session batting, I'll get one of the boys to run out my other bottle, which has got some carbs in. Or if I've had a long session batting, I've still got some food in my bag afterwards that I can refuel on. So it's that principle of I finished training, I'm going to really get the carbs back in as a priority, a little bit of protein, not too much, and then have enough bits of fuel for that thing that I'm going to do.
Do you think there's any truth to the rate of absorption of protein? They say like you can only absorb like 20, 30 grams per meal.
No, it's not like that actually. It's not like that at all. Yeah. No, you definitely use it. Like your body will just keep it kicking around, and it will draw down on it when it needs it. So it is not wasted. You don't need to like just stick to 30 grams, especially like go your size. You're going to need a big intake, so it's just not realistic for you to have it like spaced out in 20-gram doses. So split it evenly.
Should you have carbs sort of just stop, like insulin sensitivity spike? Should you just limit carbs to around workout times and try and minimise having carbs for breakfast and stuff? Or?
No, that's a bit misunderstood actually, that whole insulin spiking thing. Like it doesn't work like that. If you've got relatively balanced meals, then it won't spike in any noticeable amount. Like if taking your protein shake on its own after your workout is doable, that's probably still not going to have a big deal. If we train a lot, our insulin sensitivity is better anyway than it is if we sit on our backside working in the office all day. So it's not really a thing in the way people think it is. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I've got quite a good article explaining the role of insulin and how insulin sensitivity works, but the take home is it's not really a thing. So when people talk about like if you have artificial sweetness, it spikes your insulin. Well, A, it doesn't, and B, it doesn't matter if it spikes your insulin, your body sorts it out unless you're a type 1 diabetic or you have to take insulin or metformin. Then it's a bit different. But if you're not in that category, it's all good. Your body sorts it out.
Go back to having carbs at breakfast then.
Yeah. Like if you feel good on it, and there's probably no reason not to.
Yeah. Is it right to have like a whole avocado every morning? There's nothing like that.
At your size, yes, but calorie-wise, I'm talking. If it fits, yeah, absolutely, yeah, and you enjoy it.
I don't enjoy it, no.
You don't enjoy it? Well, then no, it's not. Like, so, it gives you some healthy fats, but there are other ways of getting that in. Like, if it helps you stick to the meals you're eating, if it helps you nourish yourself. You drink what, sorry? You could, yeah.
So how do you measure avocado? Because I'm different, I love them.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to lose weight.
Yeah, okay.
So how much of an avocado, like a quarter, half?
So I would like a couple, 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions depending on how active you are, so that's not a lot. So if we take that, it's like probably a quarter maybe, depending on the size of the avocado. If we kind of say that or 2 of them. The reason the hand thing works is if you're really big, you've got big hands. If you're really small, you've got small hands. So your portions scale to you.
Okay, that sorts it, because I'm overeating it then.
Yeah, potentially, yeah, and that's a good point. Like, so sometimes really, like avocado is really helpful. It's really dense in calories. Just need to keep check on that if we want to lose some weight. If we want to do like strongman body, you do strongman, don't you? You think you do? Yeah. But if we're bigger, more muscular, we've got like a performance goal. We need to eat more fuel. So then stuff like avocado comes in handy because it means we can eat enough calories because there's only so many grams of oats you can eat in a day.
For like the caffeine thing.
Yeah.
Caffeine doesn't work for me because
Fine.
I drink it.
Yeah, a bit like me. Fine.
Are there any other supplements that you would recommend for that quick energy? Because obviously there's so many like pre-workouts out there. But most of them are caffeine based anyway.
Yeah, so you can get hold of some pre-workouts that aren't, which might help. If you genuinely want that caffeine hit, it comes to sort of like spacing it out a little bit, if that's possible.
It's basically my only drink.
But I mean, the thing is as well though, like sometimes with a pre-workout, just take it when you really need it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just have a minging session, you'll feel awful, you really don't want to train. That's the time to go pre-workout, just to give yourself, like, get yourself over the line to make a start. If you get up in the morning, you feel great, you've had loads of rest, you're ready to go, you probably don't need the pre-workout. Like, you're already hyped and like, if you're having a good session, crack on. Really cold glass of water. You can get caffeine tablets, which if you supplement with those, you don't get the, so like if you take too much caffeine, a lot of people start to get a bit jittery. With the caffeine tablet, you can better choose your dose and you don't get the jitters as much, which might be helpful as an alternative to just an espresso, for example.
And as a nutritionist, how much would you say is too much caffeine?
You are, as a rule of thumb, and everyone has their own tolerance, like 4 cups of coffee a day, strong coffee a day is plenty. But, yeah. It depends on your body size, depends on your tolerance to it. Key with caffeine is to try not to drink it past, I'm going to say 2 p.m. because it's got a really long half-life. Even if you drink it at 2 p.m., like if you drink it at like 4 p.m. and you're going to bed at 9, 10, it might still be kicking around.
Yeah.
And whilst you will definitely still get to sleep, you could probably nail a double espresso just before you get into bed and go to sleep. Your sleep quality is awful because it sticks around for so long. So when it's hot and you toss and turn, you don't go back into a deep sleep. If the cat's screaming outside and it wakes you up, you don't go back into a deep sleep. That's why you don't drink it close to bed. A lot of people say, oh, I can fall asleep really easily. Same with booze, it's going to wreck your sleep. It's got pros and cons, but having a glass of wine before bed is not the solution to not being able to sleep.
So does the training not counteract any of the caffeine intake? Because then if you like had caffeine but then had a big, say you had an hour session, does that not impact how quickly that caffeine's exits your system because you're like utilising it, I guess?
I don't know, that's a good question. I was just trying to think about mechanistically, potentially, but what the caffeine does is it blocks all the fatigue receptors in our brain.
Sure.
And so you are basically like putting, if there's like 10 blocks of fatigue, you're putting a sticking plaster on all 10 of them. And the only way to get rid of them is to go to bed. So potentially, but even if it did, you've still got like this fatigue debt that you need to recover by resting.
Yeah.
So potentially, but I don't know exactly.
So one more thing for me is coming back to sort of like the timing with carbs and things. If you're on like a fat loss goal and you've worked out your macros and stuff and you're on a limited amount of carbs to fit within that, a sensible amount, but it's still limited, would you be more beneficial to time them before and after your training session rather than having a small amount throughout the day, or do you think you'd be better fueled to have a bit throughout?
The most beneficial thing is to do what's most sustainable for you. Okay. So like in the evening, if you really prefer a high carb meal, I'd throw them all at that. Yeah. Give yourself a big option for what you want to eat. If you just like to have carbs all of the time, drip feed them, split them up in the way that's best for you. It doesn't really matter. The overall fortnightly amount is what matters the most. If you are working out your macros, let's say 1.8 grams of protein per kilo, 20 to 30% fat, the rest of it's your carbs.
So do you not think you perform better by having it around the workout though, rather than not?
It's going to be, provided you eat your carbs for the day, that go into your bloodstream, that's stored in your muscles as muscle glycogen and in your liver. Yeah. Those stores are then full, they can be drawn down on whenever you want.
As long as they're like a slow release type, obviously not.
Yeah, potentially, but again, if you eat a mixed meal, that slow release doesn't really make much difference. So if you've got protein and fat in the middle, it doesn't matter too much. If it's stored in your muscles, if it's stored in your liver, your body will draw down on it. When they're gone, they're gone. If you feel better training with carbs in your meal, and maybe that's just psychological, but that's still going to give you a good workout. Yeah, you might have a bit kicking around your bloodstream still, and your body can grab hold of it a little bit quicker, but it can get it really quickly from your muscles and your liver too. Yeah.
You mentioned like fast and slow release, like protein with whey.
Yeah.
It's very fast absorbing. Would it be beneficial to have like a casein protein before bed, or would your body hold on to protein when it
Casein does theoretically release slower before bed, so you theoretically get to drip feed it for longer as you're sleeping and recovering.
Would it be better to have a casein like shake after the gym or a whey shake after the gym?
Do the one that you like. I'd say probably just the whey shakes are going to absorb quicker than have the casein one before bed for exactly what you describe. It might be absorbed slower. You drip feed it through the night when you can't eat because you're asleep.
Yeah.
Like, that's the reason to do that.
Especially worthwhile if you know you're not going to have a meal or access to a meal after working out like straight away for a few, you know it's going to be a few hours, maybe like have a casein one then because you know you're going to...
Yeah, potentially. I mean, yeah, like if casein's the one you've got and have it, there's not going to be a massive difference between the two. If you can afford to have both of them, maybe go for the whey because it's straight in. Again, workout, protein is kickstart that. The whey gets absorbed quicker, you kickstart it quicker. But we're talking 1-2%ers here.
Yeah.
Like, if the bigger rocks aren't moved, they're not going to make a huge difference. So that was a really good session. It was great to meet all the members here at Athlete. We had some great discussions, some really good questions. If you want to find out a little bit more, if you've got some questions of your own, head over to my website, www.foodflexibility.co.uk. Ask me a question. I'd love to help.